In most professions, you can hide, but in a creative profession, you can never hide.
I'm Doreen Lorenzo.
And I'm Michael Baker.
Welcome to Creativity is the Job of the Future, where we talk to people who are harnessing the power of creativity to overcome major challenges.
It's very inconvenient if somebody is creative. Difficult kids in school. And so a lot of creative people don't have the courage to be the way they should be.
Everyone has to find their own interpretation of what creativity means, and there needs to be a certain passion around it too. I'm Patricia Roller. I'm the CEO of Vidlet, a company that does storytelling of end customers using video.
I'm Hartmut Esslinger, supportive collaborator, and yeah, that's me.
I'm Rebecca McEnroy, executive producer for Creativity is the Job of the Future. It's not hyperbole to say that our guests on this episode shaped how the world sees and touches technology. Hartmut Esslinger founded the studio that became Frog Design in 1969, and his work, from Sony's Trinitron televisions to the design language that defined Apple's products from 1984 to 1990, now sits in the collections of MoMA and the Whitney. Patricia Roller, Frog's longtime co-CEO, was the business mind who built the firm into a global force, a partnership they sum up as the brain and the heart together. Our fearless host, Doreen Lorenzo, knows them well. She led Frog after their departure and later co-founded Vidlet with Patricia. In this candid, wide-ranging conversation, Hartmut and Patricia lay out a philosophy of creativity, discuss the responsibilities corporations and society owe to creative people and to creativity, emphasize the need for truth and honesty, and share profound wisdom earned through success, failure, diligence, and passion.
Welcome, Patricia and Hartmut. This is Patricia Roller and Hartmut Esslinger. Just a disclaimer before we get started. I know these two really well, and if I never did, I want to thank them because I wouldn't be here without them giving me the opportunity to try something new and different. And they brought me into this world of design and almost 30 years ago, and I never left. So thank you very much for that. I learned a lot from you two. You're very different, but you have terrific stories to tell that keep intersecting. So we started this podcast with the idea when everybody was telling us that AI was going to take over creativity and design and machines and what are you doing? And you should stop teaching yourself. We're like, hold on. We really think that creativity is that skill that you need in everything that you do, whether you're in business or you're a fine artist. Like you need creativity. You need to problem solve constantly, which I will say I learned very much so at Frog, even though it was a design firm, it was all about problem solving. And the problems sometimes had to do with making something, but sometimes it was just a problem that we had to solve about people's businesses. So it was everything around. So I learned that really well. So we started this podcast to interview just different people to tell us about how they use creativity in their life. And I don't think we could do this without interviewing the two of you.
Doreen and I, as we've been working on developing the program at the University of Texas, in addition to AI, which is sort of the latest technological disruption, we also started to recognize that creative thinking and creative practice and generative ideas and approaching the world in that way does have value beyond the way that it is typically organized at a big university. It sort of lives officially in colleges of fine art and design programs, for example. But obviously it can be applied and should be applied everywhere. And so in many ways, this project is about us exploring that idea and kind of returning the superpower that we believe everyone has back to people. It's almost like creativity and design has become this thing that is it is inaccessible unless you have access to a particular education, for example. But we think everyone has it and that it's important for all. So there's sort of a bigger picture there too that we're feeling our way through with this show.
And Michael, you already used two terms that are very interesting, art and then applied. And I think that's an interesting subject in itself. Like people often see art as like painting, music, and you had people on that focus on that. But then I think how do you apply it in everyday life and make it something meaningful where a lot of people can tap into that creativity for themselves or experiencing from others. So I think those two terms, applied and art, are very interesting.
Yeah, actually, I have some objection here.
Okay.
I don't think that everybody is creative. I think that's one of the American lies. But the few who are creative should be more mentored, recognized, and really put in a position they can be creative. I think society overall is not creative, it's suppressive. And we are sorry to say that. Speaking of AI, David Gillanter, he was he also lost his hand to the Unabomber. And with his father, he developed a modern version of artificial intelligence, not of LLMs. And his thesis is that creativity is not programmable. The few you have it should be really honored and respected for having it. But it's very inconvenient if somebody is creative. Difficult kids in school. And so a lot of creative people don't have the courage to jump over the bump to be the way they should be. So I think we also should be a bit focused, how can we promote and mentor creativity instead of always, we have done it before, have to comply. I think also that I call it creativity chic. You want to be a designer, but you cannot be, which is really a tragedy. And it does not only mean design, I mean, it means every aspect of life. So the most creative, funny thing is a creative accountant was creative in his or her way. So I would actually also get a bit to the point. How do we promote, we have to find talent, also as parent, as in kindergarten and school, and then help those people, those kids, to be what they are supposed to be. And then also an obligation to the creative people that you have also to serve community with your talent to help other people to be good in what they are good at. This mutual respect.
Do you think in schools in particular, elementary schools, the creativity is kind of just shut down in them and they're not allowed to develop? I mean, you said something interesting about they're difficult children in school, and I tend to agree with that. I mean, I think there's, and I'm wondering if it's because they're not allowed to think outside of the rules that are in schools today. Is that something you think is true?
I remember, I mean, our children are now growing up, but I remember when Anna was in elementary school and she said, we have to create this picture with Kandinsky art. And so she created a picture and I was like, Anna, that's not Kandinsky art, that's your art. Like, don't just copy and paste, right? Create something that you might interpret another artist, but it has to be yours. And she mentioned it to the teacher, and they did not like that idea at all. No.
Yeah, okay. I cannot say too much about myself, but I had problems in school.
But imagine, Hartmut, tell us about that.
No, but in the village school, the point was we were only 8 kids, and we could do what we wanted to do because the teacher was very qualified, and it was really one-on-one teaching. So each kid had its own speed. But when I came to the high school, suddenly there was this military-like classroom, and everything was more for conformity, and you want to break out because it's not working. And I think creativity also means it cannot be scheduled. That's another big problem. For example, we had a music teacher. That was really the best teacher for me. He didn't follow the lessons plan by timing. He finished when it was done. And the other teachers later produced and had to work until he was done. And that was the most inspirational thing for me, that you finish something, you finish a thought, you finish a discussion. You don't just walk off and something else happens. So I think it's also being asymmetric, ambiguous, uh, accepting that kids, especially children, teachers to children, discipline is one thing, but it's also how to get excited, how to get committed. And I think that's one thing can help.
Tell us a little bit, both of you, a little bit about how you did break out and how you kind of went down this path. I think people would love to hear that story.
Yeah, I got kicked out of class.
Yeah, okay, but then what did you do, right?
The point was, I mean, you have to live in the system. You cannot just negate it. One point clearly is you also have to make your degrees. You cannot just, a lot of creative people claim I'm creative, doesn't apply to me, and I can do what I want. And this is actually not very productive. I think normally there are people like that. I think there's obligation to, you get a talent or you get something. Also other talents, like what your talents are very different from mine.
Right.
But you must actually also deserve what you do.
Well, you have to find your talent. And Doreen, you mentioned frog in the beginning where we worked, right? And as you know, people there were very creative about shapes and colors and building experiences. And I never felt creative there. I always thought that I was a little bit of an imposter watching these people that are so passionate about, like I said, shape and color and things like that. And then I only started feeling creative when I created my own thing with Vidlet, where we record experiences on video and do the storytelling of a customer experience. So I probably feel only creative now later in life. Never felt that early in life. Like being amongst people like Hartmut, who's very good at something. You're also very bad at some things. But so I think everyone has to find their own interpretation of what creativity means. And there needs to be a certain passion around it too. Like if you're passionate about it.
But in our experience, okay, it sounds a bit strange, but normally you live in the future when you are creative because you see things others don't see. You see things in context, and that's very irritating. And what I initially right away felt with Patricia, that she also was living in her way some ahead. And I think that we help, actually, we are actually made for each other. So you have something I don't have. You have a lot I don't have. And I have something.
Well, you had a funny example in the podcast where with the gaming and the cards, I can't probably describe it the right way, but one of the games was leftovers in the refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that example a lot because I would look at a refrigerator with one egg in it and I see a meal. And Hartmut would look at the refrigerator with one egg and go shopping, right? So different creativity.
Yeah.
You would make a list.
Yeah, what's missing? Yeah.
But Michael, I'll let you jump in. And it's interesting too when you discuss, because everything you're talking about is really, it's all this problem solving. I mean, I think, Hartmut, I remember you saying something in a meeting, and you said to a bunch of designers, and you said, well, if it's for you, then it's an art piece, go to the museum. But you're solving a problem and you got to look at all the issues around it. And I have seen both of you do that. So Patricia, it's interesting what you said about yourself, because I saw you in that business and you were just like, you were super creative about that business, about how it molded and flexed and where offices were going to be open and what to do. So it's interesting that your perception of yourself was maybe I wasn't making shapes,
Yep.
but the way the business was put together, who we were going to hire, what office we were going to open. I mean, you were so, that to me was very creative in terms of, because nobody was doing that kind of stuff back then with firms. So it's interesting to think about what is creativity. And to me, that was the yin to Hartmut's yang, right? So Hartmut had, yes, for shapes and forms and can do all this stuff. And you were like, okay, how are we going to put this business together so it's going to make sense? And as close as we always came to losing our shirt, we seemed to recover, from things, right? And that was part of that creative problem solving.
Yeah, going to the edge in terms of, and right back at you, by the way, Doreen, because I think you did that as well. And I talked to some former frogs last week in that dinner, and they all say what a creative environment it was at the time. You have heard it, right? Everyone always goes back to, oh, wow, this was just the best environment, even though they decided to leave. And I think and then I asked Murphy, who you know, Murphy Freeland, and she said, well, we just hired people that were interesting. They needed to have a certain skill, but most of all, sometimes we didn't even know how we could fit them in, but they were interesting. And then the environment made it work for them to do the best they can do.
Yeah, the point is,
right? You did the same thing.
Yeah, and the point is a creative environment accepts creative people and lets them do what they are supposed to do, not to put them back into the box. And Steve Jobs had this also a little bit, that he got good people in. There was a lot of fighting, but he let the people work. And when his successors came in, creativity died instantly. Became this klutz and shut everything down. And I think you need a creative environment needs to accept chaos, but you also have an obligation to do something with it. And I think that was understood in Frog, and still is, that when you come here, you also have to deliver. It's not just to be a dream job and be a lifestyle victim and what is a cappuccino around the corner and the latte, we know that. These were the wrong people, but the ones who didn't need the latte were the right ones, and they kept it going.
Well, the issue of, well, Michael, you should, but the issue of purpose, I mean, people, you mentioned Steve Jobs, often criticized him that he was very tough with people and asking them why they were there. I mean, you probably heard the stories where he would ask people in the elevator, why are you here?
Yeah.
And if they couldn't answer, he would send them home.
But if you cannot say why you are here, so why are you here? Just get a paycheck, sleep in the morning and sleep out in the evening, So it's really, creativity is also about clarity and honesty, because whether you're a dancer or a writer or a strategist, it's always visible what you do. Audible, music is audible. In sports, when you're not talented and drop the ball, everybody sees it. You cannot catch the ball, and you don't get the basket in. So it's pretty brutal. In most professions, you can hide, but in a creative profession, you can never hide. But that is why it's really required to have the talent. So I always said, if you don't have the talent, it is really a tragedy. But if you're talented and not diligent to deserve it, that's a crime.
How do you, maybe both of you, think about the relationship between talent, diligence, discipline, practice, like to become an effective creative or to work creatively in an effective way, regardless of domain? What do you think it takes? Is it a linear path from talent and then practice and then you become effective, or are there different ways to get there? How do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, when you grow up as a creative person, you learn how to deal with resistance and opposition. So I think that's also providing you some resilience to deal with it. And for example, one indicator was we once had a potential client visiting our studio, and then he said, "This is a great place because people are trusting that this is a safe environment, both emotionally, functionally, and so on." So if you feel I found my place, you trust yourself and you trust others. Also, a clarity, certain things are required.
But I think, Michael, I think one thing that's also part of it is you have to be passionate about it. I can see that in myself now when I create these videos about customer experiences, I can't wait to get up. I have to do it. Like I can't sleep because it's in my head and I have to get it out. And so I think that's maybe more than diligence. Diligence is something you can train yourself, right? I do this for 10 hours a day. But passion that you really want to do it, I think is also a key component. If you don't want to do it, don't do it.
Yeah,
It's too forced.
it's also what you call knowledge of people. I'm not really good at that. So you're basically my protector. But when you do the videos, for example, let's say I look for 20 videos and where they are, and I just think it's interesting. Yeah, yeah. And you look at it much different. Okay, that guy is phony. And I don't recognize anything. I have zero knowledge of that. I'm completely unfit for life. It's really
But
true.
you do the same thing. Like when you have an idea, like late at night, you will stay up and just put it on paper or, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, also naturally, uh, I just see things nobody sees when I get really angry about it because people didn't care. Okay, I don't want to mention Apple right now, but is the phone this thin or is it this thick with a camera? So I hate the daily lies, all this phony stuff. They want to tell you this is great. The emperor's new clothes, the guy is naked, you don't even want to see it. And so we can be quite cynical sometimes because, I mean, there is in Japan, when you get caught, you are out of society. In America, it's okay to lie and to cheat and to be a total phony. And so it's more interesting here because you see the guys in the open playing completely crazy. They try to fool people, and some people get fooled. Most get fooled. So that's actually for me both entertaining and also stressful sometimes to see so much the bad stuff, the wrong stuff, the embarrassing stuff, and so people don't realize it. So creativity is also about observation, curiosity, and being a bit nosy. Yeah. You also stay a little bit a child. As a creative person, you're never adopting to adulthood.
Well, I think what you're saying is retain your childhood curiosity, which gets lost, right? We as we become adults, it's kind of beaten out of us to be that because we're told to follow these rules or whatever those rules might be at this moment in time, as opposed to saying, but why?
Right. I mean, Doreen, I told you the example of a friend who applied for a job as a designer and they told her she was a good match, but didn't match the last 10%. And I was like, what does that even mean, the last 10%? Like, what are you trying to beat out of her to fit exactly into that mold? Rather than, yeah, if you think she's overall creative and a good match, hire
Yeah,
her.
that was such a weird comment, like the last 10%. So there's this mold of a person that they had or they didn't. I don't know. It's very strange. But Patricia, I want you both to talk a little bit about starting Vidlet. You took something that was not what it was and turned it into something very creative. And then Hartmut, you got to talk a little bit about your Apple days.
Well, Hartmut's Apple days actually started probably even with Sony, right? So, I mean, one of the reasons why Steve Jobs was hiring you was that he saw that made in Japan in that era was not perceived at a high value. and you were able to help Sony change that. And I think that's probably what he
No,
said.
yeah, actually, one point was so the personal computer started in the 70s, and I thought it was clear that this would be a product to come for everybody, but naturally everything was more the geek stuff and business and science. And even early personal computers, you still have to plug in different cross connections, like at the Turing machine. And Sony was not willing to do computers, for example, because it didn't match their strategic picture yet. And so HP and IBM were too much structured when you talk to them. They gave you a place. Okay, we want to give us inspiration, but then you're out, which is still kind of the typical thing today. Come in, give us inspiration, and then disappear. And we do the thing because we know better. And Apple actually was young enough. Steve Jobs was a lucky match that he understood, yeah, we can change things on principles. We can move the strategic layer to everybody instead of elite and hobbyists. I think that was the key thing. But it's also very hard to describe why it worked.
But I think you probably need to talk more about the Apple and Steve Jobs story, right, Doreen?
It would be, yeah, just how he found you and the working relationship. And, it was a long one. You worked together for a long time.
One day in Germany, I got a call from a young designer who was employed in Holland and not getting paid. His name was Jack Hawkinson. And he came to us at Road Frog, so went back to America, made his own small business as a model shop. And then when I thought it was time to approach Apple, Jack opened the door. So you could actually say if we would not have gotten Jack into the team 5 years before, we would not have the connection inside Apple via Jack to Steve Jobs. And then we got a meeting and then we could talk. So that was actually a coincidence, you could call it, but I think also expression of respecting creative people need to get a good job and need to get paid well and not being exploited by. So that's it. The key issue with Steve Jobs was, I think in the first conversation, he said, I want to sell 1 million Macs. And I said, but not the way they look. And you cannot make them here in America. And then he said, okay, can you help me? He said, that's how we do it at Sony. You have a system of suppliers. You can do this, Singapore, and so on and so on. And then he listened.
But also, I think people remember Steve Jobs as this tastemaker, right? You have to also remember when he started out, he wasn't there yet. In fact, he was very interested in Europe, very interested in Asia. And I think you fulfilled that by having both being from Europe, having worked in Asia. What he was very, very good at is really absorbing everything that he saw.
Yeah.
Like whether it was like shoes people were wearing or how certain things were expressed. And I think that's where you two were really two peas in a pod. I
mean, for example, he also was asking, what is the European thing? And I explained the Catholic Church with the Pope in white, everybody else in color. And the Pope is always right. He's infallible. He liked that, even as he was more tending to the Buddhist way of philosophy. But an important point also, I think it's important to say that Steve already was very isolated in Apple because the company was public. The Apple II was successful. The Apple III was not successful. Total flop. The Lisa that we're working on also was not working. They had pushed Steve to be the chairman, a paper post, and the corporate board had taken over. Michael Scott was CEO, and he ran the company like a chip company. So it was already American disease, 5 divisions, and everybody made what he or she wanted to do. They never talked to each other. So they had a briefing for the design community to work together, but the only thing they asked for that they would get one more reporting level in engineering. They should not talk to the small engineer, they should talk to the engineering boss of their group. But that was not solving it. The point was Steve Jobs himself should be the guy directing it. But at the moment when we started to talk, he had no power. They pushed him out. And then he used the Macintosh group to make his own point of an affordable bitmap software-based computer against the others. And ironically, it was Wozniak who supported us operationally more because the Macintosh team also rejected me. So it was really a political quagmire, so to say. And you had to be just stubborn and trusting yourself. It's either working or not. We took some incredible stupid risks because in hindsight, it was like walking on thin ice, you know?
What are those risks? What are some of the stupid risks you took?
Yeah,
Starting a company.
yeah,
Mhm.
doubling our German organization, bring it to America, that was insane. Based on the political reality in Apple, where everybody hated us. You know, and they also set us up when we did the Apple IIc, the little thing, which actually was a breakthrough in public. They also did a trap. They ordered 55,000 systems to prove they could fire us. No kidding. And then they launched it in the Moscow Center, and then the trucks from CompUSA and Best Buy came by, they loaded in the afternoon, the computers were gone. So, and then we had to fire the guys who opposed us. Simple as that. I wrote it in my book way back. It was not simple. It was also lucky. A lot of people didn't like it to be successful.
What kept you in it? Why stay with this project?
Because I had to. This was a chance of a lifetime to change something really important. Sony was kind of consumer electronics, but that was not so radical. But this was a chance of a lifetime, you don't think. You just do. And we did.
Well, you did. I mean, that's really history has shown that. It's interesting because it looks like now, oh, you produce what you called Snow White. You produce this, this iconic product and a whole series of product, and it was all everybody held hands. But I don't think people realized all that, like today, all the infighting people. I mean, I think this is a generalization, but I think it's that people don't like change. You came in, you were a change maker. I mean, people don't like change. And Patricia, I want to hang on to that because I want to talk a little bit about Vidlet because that's a change maker and you run into that too. But people don't like change. I think creativity is making change.
You have to communicate and make it understandable. For example, if you mention Snow White, the end result was we had designed a shop, a future Apple store, and it was filled with all the new products, how they would look together, with shelves, with everything. And so the board, when they finally came in, they realized that that's really, then it was understood, this is where we have to go. So it's not enough just to show a model. The media tries to simplify you down to one piece. It's completely wrong. You have to communicate to people from their point of view. So the people at Apple expected success in getting out of the crisis. They didn't judge the design for aesthetics or whatever. They just saw that's something, yeah, that makes sense, you know?
Just one more point you said, which I think is interesting. You developed the store concepts, and in that you had phones and you had all sorts of things. And this was the early 80s. So it takes a while for this.
I mean, we also made a projection 20 years out, 2000 plus. And then actually we made the little tablet and the Macintosh in the pocket and phones and everything. I mean, technology changes by getting smaller, 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 and more powerful, more powerful, more powerful. So you can also look at trends happened the last couple of years, what will happen forward. And sometimes science takes the wrong turn or technology and creates something wrong. And you're not always right, but I think we were right that digital technology would become smaller, more powerful, and that's logical because the electronic system can be compressed, and then usability has a new dimension. So we solved the hardware problem, but we didn't solve the connection problem. So you also have to adopt technology to human needs. The iPhone actually is, or the smartphones are a joke with those little things on the side. Most people don't see them. So that's why I like your videos. Sometimes they are really, well, things got really bad here, you know. Sorry, I'm talking too much, Patricia.
Yeah, no, let's talk a little bit. You refer to the video. So, Patricia, you kind of embarked on something totally different, but the same. You took a company that was collecting video. I don't even know what they did, but collecting video content. You had invested some in it, and then you decided to totally morph it into something. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, as Hartmut already said, at the end of the day, it's what customers do with things, right? And I think at Frog, we often did this very intuitively, understanding. And people often said that Apple didn't do research, but I think Steve Jobs was very observant. And I think that's what you need to be. And so we created a company that allows customers to tell their story through video by recording themselves and showing an experience. And as Hartmut said, there's often a big difference between what people say and what we then see. And most experiences today, no matter what we do every day, are in some ways broken. And I think as consumers, we often have learned to accept that. Because companies bring out, like you said, a thinner phone or smaller phone, and we just accept that that's the new way of doing it, rather than thinking about what's actually really working for them. And Doreen, you said something earlier where companies have become so big, where they often cannot even see who's working on what. When you show them what their customers are experiencing on video, they often don't even get close to the customer anymore. And it's a game changer because you see the little pain points. I mean, I'm even surprised we're on this call today. Normally you get on a Zoom call and someone goes, "Can you hear me now? You know, is my camera on?" And here we talk about AI and how we all envision AI to work for us in the future with, like you said, voice and gestures and whatever. But we often cannot even solve basic problems of how people do things today. And I think when we adopt a new technology, whether it was the internet, the 2000s, or AI today, we first have to solve users' basic needs. And seeing it is just fun.
Yeah, but it is connected with what we did at Frog, because you just took the early stage. We made assumptions, to be totally honest. A lot we faked because we didn't know how it really went. I mean, this whole design thinking idiocy, that's exactly taking the wrong exit and getting sunk in the swamp. And I think you choose logically, also by your own creative ambition, yeah. You said, I want to do it right. So I think you went to the point to really look at real people and make it serious. And also market research is a phony business, most persons don't even exist. We know there's all this crap. You go to people video and they feel obliged. We did that at Frog. I feel guilty. And then they want to please you. And then you have the results, it's all lying. What I see, and that's also, you want to look at the truth. You're very truth, reality focused. No phony excuse. And I think the pandemic helped Vidlet, because people couldn't fly and could not continue this phony market research. And actually, I like it because it connects to my work.
But it also, I mean, in the Frog days, when you started with Apple, technology was often still a differentiator. Nowadays, everyone has access to the same technology, right? Every company can buy the same technology if they want to. So the only differentiator is, in the end, what the customer does with it and shaping that experience. And that was a little bit different back in the, let's say, early Frog days, where developing technology was still a key differentiator for companies. Not today.
Very good point. Back then, you had really it's very complicated to get a highly integrated technology product. Today, you can go to Foxconn, I want a smartphone, you have the money and the market, they do it. You can get a car. Foxconn builds cars. I mean, it's actually absurd that the factories now have the power to produce everything you want if you can pay for it and you can have a market for it. So I think it's even more important to find out what will be my brand, what will be my target, what do they expect, what they really need, not just faking it.
Well, I also think I want to just kind of jump in. I think one of the things, Patricia, that you're selling yourself short on is you're changing the way people are doing this research. And I think that's been, teaching people and educating people about the adoption of it because, everybody's like, well, no, I mean, at Frog, right, Hartmut, we'd send a whole team of people around the world. It would be, $100,000 and they would travel around the world and they go to different countries and they take their video cameras and you walk into somebody's house and maybe you get a good interview, maybe you wouldn't. Very expensive. But today you could do all that literally in 24 hours by coming up with the questions, having people download the app and sending some. That is a different way. And the information is terrific. So you kind of turn the industry on its head a little bit here.
Right. And the industry doesn't like it because companies make a lot of money on these trips, visiting people at home, observing what they do. But money is only one component. I mean, we interview people about, let's say, their colonoscopy. And they will, if we have built trust by engaging them and say, like, tell us your story because we really want to make your life better, they will lift up their shirt in front of their camera. They would not do that if you come home, right? And they record what their stoma looks like and talk about it in a very passionate way. Not like you sitting there and they already cleaned up their house. So yes, it's a very, very different way of doing it where we really trust the end user to be able to tell their story. Mm-hmm. And many companies don't believe, they don't have that faith in their end customers, but they are the ones that buy your product.
Okay, I'm just observing here, but then some said, okay, our executives don't want to see that, I think sometimes the truth is so inconvenient.
It is very true. I mean, we have had customers where we could prove that their customers had the product they wanted to improve. But then when we show the video of the customer using it, 100% proof, I have your washing machine. They go like, I don't like how that person looks. Because they often think their customers look like the people in their marketing brochure. And they don't look that way. And customers, like we often segment customers into high net worth or low income or whatever. Their behavior is totally across the spectrum. Like we did a study about budget eaters and healthy eaters, and the client couldn't believe that the two could be the same. A budget eater can be a healthy eater, but those are the old images they have in their heads, right? That they have worked with for so many years. So we are trying to change that. And video is just, I mean, Doreen, you come from the film world. I mean, one frame of video says more than 3 pages of text. So just watch those couple of frames. Or Michael, in gaming, it's very the same, right? The game can bring across so much emotion.
It's also raw. Like, I remember, again, when we used to do this, it felt like they were the edited videos. And guess what? The researchers had a point of view. Mm-hmm. Researchers had a point of view, and they kind of went in and asked questions based on that point of view all the time. I mean, that's kind of how it's done, right?
I'm telling you so many times, I go in with a certain perception, knowing or expecting something I will see, and it's completely different. Completely different. So yeah, so I think our mission is to really bring end customers closer to brands because they need it. Companies are struggling right now, right? Many are not making money. Consumers will become more and more cost conscious. Many young consumers are very environmentally conscious. So you have to figure out how you serve them.
I mean, that's also one thing creativity needs. Unresolved situation. It's not a problem, I think. It's kind of a flow of developments. And in that flow, you have to recognize patterns. And if you have a pattern, then you can say, okay, there could be something. It's really floating. And often you are wrong, but then you have to accept, yes, I'm wrong. This is going nowhere, but then many people still keep going. That's also, I think, the problem with LLMs. Everybody gets the same answer, more or less. humans have the tendency to make everything complicated, to make it digestible. You find your niche. Okay, I'm the untalented something chef. Okay, sometimes when I cook, Patricia is happy. My daughter likes my German thing, but the rest I would be a horrible chef, but I could believe I'm a good chef. No, I'm not. This reality is tough, and that is actually missing. For example, my design teacher was a funny guy. I showed him what I did, and he said, Esslinger, I expect more. See you in 2 hours. And then once I asked him, why are you so tough to me and not so tough to the other guys? And he said, they will be good taxi drivers. He just said, okay, that's not working. Hopeless. And that is actually missing this whole production of designers for money. I think the education for money is a problem here in America. It's not reality based. It's just send the students out and forget about it, I'm a bit polemic here, but
Yeah. But it's fine. We're plenty to say in that conversation. So Hartmut, you mentioned early in the conversation that creatives live in the future.
yeah.
But I'm hearing a lot of, in just listening to you kind of talk about your journeys, lessons from the past, right? Some eternal concerns about people, humanity, how they interact with things, their interests, their challenges. How does the past, right, or some of these sort of eternal concerns connect with this idea of, of living in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's two things. One is education and history. The German philosopher Odo Marquardt said, future needs origins, but you also need progress. You cannot just stand still. And I think you should look at what is working, what are behaviors, what are emotional needs, what are functional needs. For example, pollution has been a real problem for centuries, as we know, and it was accepted for a long time, hygienics, pandemics, and all of it. And we really have to look at the past to understand, okay, that's how it was. And what can we take from there? But also what we can take is a flow. And naturally, now comes the future. Today is today, a product coming out was being thought about 2 or 3 years ago. So you cannot take that as a standard. You have to look what are the trend, what is the trend, getting smaller. When Bellini said this user interface will disappear, and then suddenly you are in a car, you have to tip on a display, and it's completely absurd, that has not a relationship to our tactile or AI, some augment things, and they think, okay, we can only do voice and we take the visual part away. But imagine you are blind. So is artificial intelligence meaning that we are blind? And this stupid computer just tells us what to do, like the voice in 1984, or Orwellian, hell. I think that is part of the imaginary future you envision. And then you also have to think, how will it look? How will it feel? What will it be? What will be the effects? We need circular design much more than we thought. We cannot constantly take resources and pressure them and gone. For example, my iPhone here is broken a bit, but in Japan, a broken cup is worth more than the perfect teacup. So that's a way to make things longer usable and not having this standard of always being perfect. So I think it's a mix of both. And I think designers, especially designers, should have much more history understanding and cultural history, not only political history, but cultural history. How did people really live? And what will it mean if you have nothing to do anymore? Just sit there in front of a screen and doodle along? That's not a life you are born for. Any creative field has this connection to past, present, future, but it's already here and tomorrow. How do you see it, Patricia? I mean, you're constantly looking ahead with what you do.
Yeah, I mean, from a design research perspective, you definitely have to accept how people culturally are thinking about things historically, right? I mean, most companies are now global, and yet we treat the customer experience the same and often don't understand. Like Europe is very data protection driven. This probably comes in, especially in Germany, from the Nazi time, where we value that. You cannot change that. So you have to kind of keep that history in mind when you create something for the future. So I think I agree with you. I don't always know how to project it, because I think there are also often a lot of outliers. Like, for example, the internet. I think people did not predict what it ultimately did. There's a great book about this group in New York. Doreen, you know a lot of them out of the Razorfish days. They projected the internet to be more for artists and for a creative community when it then became very capitalistic. And I think that's the same with other things that we project for the future. They will happen differently. I agree with you that you need to respect history and culture and all those things. But sometimes things just happen completely differently than we envision them. And I think that's most certainly going to be true for AI. I think people have this sense of what we're going to do. I think we have absolutely no idea.
Or just ironic, Tim Berners-Lee created the World Wide Web on the next cube in Geneva. And for the first couple of months, the World Wide Web was hosted on the next cube. And they just thought it's usable for them to communicate with each other a little bit more, file transfer and stuff like that. Think about it. So some things work and some don't. Yeah, sometimes the wrong standard gets up.
Well, the time is not right. I mean, in that book, they describe that they have something like almost like a Slack channel back in the days, in the early internet days. But it was, of course, based on a lot of modems running, right? So it was probably very complicated. But that wasn't even the issue. I think functionally, they probably could make it work. But people at the time did not think, they didn't want to be controlled in their workforce. So they were just not ready. So you could have created the best thing at that time if people are not ready to adopt it, whereas now we can't even live without Slack anymore. It is our leash, right? A little bit. And people back then just wouldn't probably have accepted it.
And sometimes people are asleep. For example, it's about 25 years ago, somebody at Boeing proposed to design drones instead of manned airplanes, and it was rejected because it's not enough revenue. It's too cheap. Now look at it, it became a consumer product, becomes a weapon. But the traditional companies rejected it for money reasons, not for conceptual. The engineers had the right idea.
Do you both feel like there are these threshold moments where you can see possibility, right? Where you sort of teleport into possible futures. Like the internet is an interesting example. It was originally just for some basic communication. And then at some point, people realized, like, oh, wait a minute. If everyone is connected, the possibilities are incredible. So do you each in your own kind of creative journeys, like, do you have these moments where you're like, oh, now I can see a possibility that could be someday?
Well, I think AI has that promise unless it's overhyped. I mean, you probably remember the buzzwords from the last 20 years, right? I mean, virtual reality was like, oh my God, we'll all live in a shop and live in a virtual world. And I think it was very clear from the beginning, it didn't drive enough value for people. It was more like entertainment, and it did some really good things. But was it really shaping the future? So I think with some things, you have a sense that it's a hype. And AI is probably overhyped right now. I think we already talked about that. I think we have to figure out what it can actually really do to drive value to users. But is it always predictable? No.
They're tools. I mean, we've seen this over time, so many times, new tools, and this is a really powerful tool, and we're going to use it. But so was the personal computer, and so was the World Wide Web, and they changed, and people still got employed and did different jobs, and we taught people different skill sets, and that's kind of the evolution. And you don't want to change. I don't think you want to stop that. I think, Hartmut, you kept saying you got to look to the future, though. Like, don't look back. Right?
Yeah, a famous example is Mr. Hoff. He was an Intel development engineer. Back then, computers were still these refrigerators. And a Japanese company called Sega wanted to do a game, and they asked Intel if they could develop a little thing who could be basic computing for a video game. So it would be handheld, battery powered. And then he and another guy, that name I forgot, developed a microprocessor, this little thing, which suddenly was a computer. And then Voss took it, not Intel, not IBM. So Sega actually was the initiator of the personal computer revolution. But the technology naturally was there. They knew we could do that with transistors instead of this big chip with the flip-flops. And the smaller, the better, because even if it's only 200,000 miles per second, it's still a finite speed of electronic waves. And so he computed when it's small, it's a zillion times faster than racing around in this refrigerator thing, you know, and being irritated by cross-inductive influences. So it was a theoretical thinking as a physicist he had, but the initiator was a gaming company who had a crazy idea in Japan. Why not handheld, not connected to the big console? And so suddenly progress is accidental.
Yeah.
Hartmut, you mentioned circular design earlier, and I know that in the past you've spoken about co-design, and we have these these days there are various different ways of kind of thinking about design process and practice. And so is that an evolution? Like I kind of think of or sort of see this space as, well, user-centered design kind of emerged as a practice or as a framework or as a way to approach the design process. And then that kind of led to co-design, and now we have these other concerns like circular design, planet-centered design, that sort of thing. How do you sort of see that? See how those things connect? Like, are these just the latest window dressing on one process, or is there an evolution that you sort of see?
Okay, good, Michael, that you mentioned this problem. Design is design, okay? That is a very ambiguous word. You also can design for a war. Design has 30, I think the Webster, 32 different descriptions of design. If you say what I do is industrial design, design for people using industrious processes and methods. And actually that has to do with people. So what is an enterprise? I mean, it's very universally embedded in this capitalist economic system. And as I said in the beginning, a lot of people want to escape from the professional rigor required by creating kind of a niche. Okay, as I said, I'm a design thinker. I don't do anything, Um, I am user-centric. Everything is user-centric. So why would it suddenly be an extra profession? I think it starts with the people, with the company. What are their strategic objectives? What is the interconnect? How competent are they? How loyal are they? How ethical are they? And that's the first decision. Are you working with criminals or not? So some exaggerate a bit, but some companies exploit their customers. And some people serve them. A lot of Apple was ego, to be totally honest. It's also fine. When you want to win a championship, you don't want to have a Boy Scout group going out to win a Super Bowl. That's pretty tough. And so the tendency to soften it up naturally is natural because it's chic. The friend, chic in French means it's actually not. And it's also the human factor. For example, at the beginning, Vuitton asked me to work with them because I was German. That was the only reason. Because they're French. Henri Camé, he was the husband of the granddaughter of Louis Vuitton. He was a steel manager in Alsace-Lorraine. And then at age 60, he had to retire, the French rule. And then he took over, what can we do with the Vuitton shops? There was a shop in the Avenue Marceau and one in Nice. Together, they made 13 million US dollars revenue, mostly with customers coming in from Japan. Because it became a fad in Japan to have a Vuitton bag. And if you only got 3 bags, one for yourself, and you had to sign not to sell it. You had a number, and you could sell 2 in Japan, and that paid for your hotel and flight plus profit. And they even served coffee on the sidewalk for people waiting. Now he said, how can we make that a brand? And there was a French musical star, Mireille Mathieu, a singer, and she used Louis Vuitton and actually showed it off and said, that's something. And then also when I once had a hotel night at Montparnasse Hotel, I saw that prostitutes had Louis Vuitton bags. So I asked him, is this real or is it fake? And they said, c'est true, that's real, sure. And I said to Henri, okay, it matches everything from top to bottom, but it never matches. That's the secret of the brand. And that was a start. So it was not design. It was an observation. It was discussions. And I only got approached because he thought Germans are a bit more reliable than the Italians and the French designers who were kind of unreliable. Brilliant, but unreliable. And so that's how it started. Also with Apple, I prepared myself and it clicked. And with a lot of times it did not click, you know. So you only see the few things shining, but I tell you, if it would be a basketball game, we just won by 2 points, I would say. There was a lot of setbacks, and it's natural, yeah. But I think we are a little bit, especially in the creative areas, it's so, and we also had a discussion with Barack Obama once. I said, not everybody should go to college. We need vocational training. So you talk jobs back, you need something else back. You need a culture of industrial conviction, but that's not acceptable socially. You know, people, we now want to import factories from abroad instead of developing our own industrial culture again. Will be even worse. So it's very complex, and I think you have to accept complexity. And then basically, if you feel good about it to do this, then it's the right thing. If you're afraid, it's also good because you're realistic. And if you believe, okay, it's all cool, you're doomed, yeah.
Hartmut Esslinger founded the studio that became Frog Design. Patricia Roller is the business mind who built Frog into a global force as its longtime co-CEO, and founded Vidlet with our very own Doreen Lorenzo to gain insight into how customers truly use and interact with products. You can find more information on this episode, plus resources, links, bios, and so much more at cjfpodcast.com. Creativity is the Job of the Future is hosted by Doreen Lorenzo and Michael Baker and produced in Austin, Texas. For Creativity is the Job of the Future, I'm Rebecca McEnroy. Thanks for listening.